Hello, Mage fans, and welcome to Mage the podcast that works hard towards ascension, so you don't have to. I'm your host, Adam, and I'm joined today by Jiba Anderson, author of the Bata'a chapter for the new Mage 20 book, Forbidden and Forgotten Orders. This book gives us a chapter covering each of the 10 crafts that make up the Disparate Alliance. Jiba Anderson wrote the chapter on the Bata'a. Jiba, how are you doing today?
Doing all right. How are you doing today?
Well, I'm doing pretty well. This is about the middle of the day, so I've got my energy up and ready for a good discussion on your work for this book. Now, I heard this was your first time writing for Mage, but this is not your first time writing for Onyx Path role-playing games. Can I hear about one or two of the things you did before?
So with Onyx Path, I've actually written 5 projects for them. So in this universe, if you will, the world of darkness, I've written for Vampire the Masquerade. I worked on Chicago by Night Volume 5. I also wrote for Wraith the Oblivion, and I redesigned the Dark Kingdom of Ivory, which is the African underworld, which leads into Mage the Ascension, where, of course, I worked on the Bata'a. And actually, in the stuff that I've done for Onyx Path, there is a through line. There is something of like this secret sub-universe that I've worked into. So the way I looked at it when I was working on this stuff is that stuff I worked on for Vampire leads into the stuff that I worked on for Wraith, which leads into the stuff that I worked on for Mage. So all of this comes together in this thing that I like to call the Dark Kingdom itself. And it gave me this opportunity, in addition to the other games that I wrote for Onyx Path, to sort of create this sub-franchise dealing a lot with African and diasporic African spirituality.
How much of the older material on the Bata'a did you want to use when you were working on this new chapter for them?
So, of course, Onyx Path gave me the information before I started working. I needed to see what was happening. I needed to see the nuts and bolts of what came before, because I'm not a creator that if I'm working on a franchise, I'm not necessarily throwing out the baby with the bathwater. I wanted to see what they had, what was the basis for that, and then figure out where were the holes and how do I plug these holes, and then also how do I recontextualize what has gone on before into something that, in my opinion, would feel a little more authentic, if you will, in terms of the African-American experience in the world. So that's where I started. So I started with what happened with the Bata'a, and then what I did is that I actually did my research in terms of like history, right? And the history of the African people from the continent through the transatlantic slave trade into now, and incorporating all of that material and all of those thoughts into my reimagining of the Bata'a, if that makes sense.
Music is used as a metaphor throughout your chapter. I'm guessing that was done because music is subjective. To make your own music, you blend styles, genres, etc. on an almost instinctual level, not following written directions in a book. Did you mean for players to take that metaphor in so they could mix things to create their character's approach to magic?
Definitely. One of the things, or one of the many things that is part of my DNA is that I'm a DJ as well. I had a radio show in college called Ghetto of the Mind, which is now a podcast on iTunes. And so music has always been a part of my DNA. And in approaching the Bata'a, in a lot of ways, it kind of made sense, because I'm thinking of the Bata'a, I'm thinking of, for instance, music. I'm thinking specifically hip hop as communication. Also, the way that I approach music, or the way that I play or craft playlists for my show, there's always a narrative, and there's always like secret meaning behind that, right? And so I'm using the language of music to, in essence, hide in plain sight in order for those who are Bata'a, they would get the message. If anybody else is listening to that radio show, they're just listening to songs, right? But the Bata'a, they know that each song that DJ Crossroads is playing is like a coded message, because that's the whole nature of the Bata'a. It's always about code, and it's always about hiding in plain sight, if you will. And that inspiration came from the transatlantic slave trade when enslaved Africans were brought over to places like Brazil, and they were told not to practice their religions or practice their martial arts. And so they had to hide it in plain sight, right? So the religions that they practiced became part of, or they merged with Christianity, and they became the religions like Santeria, Candomblé, Vodou, things of that nature. Their martial arts, as they were practicing, like capoeira and whatnot, the slave masters are like, oh, you guys are dancing. It's like, no, we're practicing this martial art in your face. So taking that philosophy, that's what I use to inform how the Bata'a would communicate with each other.
The 7 tribes are named with sphere specialties and descriptions. Which of those do you think would work best with other crafts or traditions in a mixed cabal?
So what happens? Let me go to the part, because there is a track, which is the book of the, was it Book of the Ally? Yes, Yamo be there, the Book of the Ally, right? And so who are the allies of the Bata'a? Well, the first ally, of course, is the Ngoma, because the Ngoma, they are the, I call them the Bata'a pure and uncut, because that is like the African-based craft, if you will. So they would work well with the Bata'a. Also, who works well with the Bata'a?
I guess I didn't get my question across very well. I was initially thinking that there are 7 tribes, like 7 groups that are inside the Bata'a. And
okay,
of those, I kind of got the impression that some like to work with people outside of the craft more, and others were more focused on what's happening inside the craft.
No, actually, when it comes to the Bata'a, the nature of the Bata'a is that, they basically, they work with each other. You know what I mean?
Okay.
And so Bata'a knows Bata'a, if you will, right? The different houses of the Bata'a, they know each other, right? They work with each other. Yes, the 7 clans made one, okay? So of the 7 clans, if you will, you've got, of course, the way that you have the Yoruba. I call them the fist, if you will. And I have the Yoruba, the Yoruba could work with the Iwe, because the Iwe is the mind. They work a lot well together, or they work well with the Mende, which is the matter craft. So they can work with anybody. The Igbo or the Akan, they can work well with the Mende or the Akan or the Congo. So it's basically, any one of these clan members can work well with another clan member, right? It's a different aspect of the 7 clans. And so with the 7 clans, they know each other, they work with each other. I mean, because they had to. The Bata'a were created as sort of this defensive mechanism for enslaved Africans who were brought over, right? And the crafts are based off of the 7 major cultures that make up the majority of the Western hemisphere of Africans in the world. So when you think about the North America, South America, you think about the islands, so on and so forth. The majority of us who call ourselves African Americans, we come from one of these 7 cultures. And that was something that I researched historically and taking that and like, okay, so which culture would represent this craft, this art, if that makes any sense.
Thanks for that. That helps me get a new lens on that. Now, the practical, eclectic magic of the Bata'a sounds very interesting. If a player wanted to make a Bata'a character, do you think they should research the culture carefully so they can portray one properly, or just dive in and try it out? I mean, how would you advise a player who wants to make a character and get into a game?
I mean, I would say, do a little bit of reading, do a little bit of research to make your character more authentic, right? Because authenticity always helps, okay? Because, I mean, at a certain point, yes, we are dealing with fantasy, we're dealing with fiction and whatnot. But myself as a creator, as we have seen, or as I have described in creating my work, there's always some fact in my fiction, which makes it richer, right? And more authentic, and gives the player more to work with, if that makes sense, right?
The craft is portrayed as being very attuned to past injustices and current social issues. If a player has a character that is less concerned with those things, is that missing the point, or is it more optional when a person is playing a character and getting into a mixed group?
Their character does not have to be as socially aware as, say, if I were creating a character and playing it, but it does help, because then it's fine to have it without that piece, but without that piece, then that player risks that character of becoming more of a stereotype and a pastiche of what they would imagine a Bata'a would be, as opposed to something more authentic, something richer. Yeah, so you could do it, but I'd say, in terms of having a rich and interesting and fascinating character, I would say do a little dive. It'll just make for a better playing experience. Don't
miss out on what's there.
Exactly. Because again, knowledge is hiding in plain sight, right?
Okay, I think I'm starting to see that now. Thanks.
The nature of the Bata'a is to use the information that is hiding in plain sight that other people don't know. Isn't that part of what being a magic user is all about?
I think you're right. Well, there's little mention of the disparate alliance in this chapter. What do you think the Bata'a's involvement with the alliance looks like?
I feel that the Bata'a are, number one, concerned about the Bata'a. They are concerned about the Bata'a's survival, right? And even when I talk about the ally or the book of the ally, it's like, yes, a Bata'a will ally themselves with other magic orders, but keep in mind, it's all about the protection of the Bata'a, first and foremost, right? So if that alliance makes sense, then it makes sense. They're not just going to link up with anybody. It's always going to be in order to further the Bata'a's agenda and also protect the Bata'a as well.
The 1996 Book of Crafts had a craft that protected its territory. This portrayal doesn't mention that as much. Did you want the craft to spread out to more of the world?
Yes, because of my imagining of the Bata'a is that they are all over the world, just like the African diaspora is all over the world, right? So it's not necessarily centralized. There's not one centralized area. There are different clans, there are different houses, they pop up all over the world. You don't know necessarily where they are. They are not so easily grouped into one area, because that also is a dangerous notion for the Bata'a, if that makes sense. If they were all concentrated in one area, then that one area is where their enemies would go to wipe them out. So they are dispersed by nature and by necessity. There is not a centralized area where the Bata'a exist, right? There are different communities where the Bata'a gather. There are different functions, like the ring shout, which happens every once in a blue moon. And again, the only people that would know about that is the Bata'a. And that information would come, for instance, from a playlist like the one DJ Crossroads put together, that the Bata'a would understand. It's like, okay, this is where we're meeting. Or something that I created for him, which I like to call meme work, because I was thinking about social media and whatnot, and thinking about formerly Black Twitter and how Black folk in the diaspora, how we communicate through social media with the use of memes and whatnot, and how our use of memes has, multiple meanings as well. So I incorporated that into the nature of the Bata'a as well.
Yeah, I remember reading about the ring shout in the chapter. So that wasn't an expression, that's an actual gathering.
Yes.
Now, I think it's pronounced Savita is a powerful item. Is it an aspiration of most Bata'a to earn one?
Not necessarily. Not necessarily. For some, yes. I mean, definitely for a Yoruba, yeah. You'd want a Savite because of the nature of the Yoruba craft, which is about spirit, you know what I mean? And it's such a powerful and such a demanding craft. They would need a Savite to help balance that out, especially if they're going to be ridden by one of the Orisha, right? So, when I created the character Malachi King, the Yoruba judge, like he needed that Savite because he's being ridden by Shango, which is one of the most powerful Orishas out there. And when you're being ridden by one of the spirits and whatnot, I mean, that's a powerful craft, and you could easily be overwhelmed by that spirit. So having a Savite in order to house that, spirit helps the Yoruba, right? It helps them out by lessening the burden, if you will, of carrying such powerful magic and such powerful spirits in their body.
But I'm thinking this probably also has a sort of cultural dimension to it. When one of the Bata'a comes into a ring shout, with others, his brothers and sisters, and he's carrying one of those, then everybody says, "Oh, this guy's earned it. This guy's done something. We'll listen to him before we listen to the new guy."
Right, exactly. The mojo bag is sort of like kind of the base, right? Every member of the Bata'a should have a mojo bag, because that's how you work your craft. You know what I mean? Because
that's how you show the other members you're serious about learning their ways.
Exactly. And because of the fact that Bata'a magic is such a workman's magic and whatnot, it's a practical magic, just like Vodou and other faith systems of the diaspora. You need that physical aspect of it, right? You need your dirt, you need your fluid, you need these things in order to work your craft and whatnot. But
so it's not so much tell me what you've learned, but show me what you've done.
Yeah. And of course, I have this piece up here right now, securing the bag, if you will, right? Because the elders would fill the mojo bag, or the tobes, as it was used to be called, with earth, ground, grave, something from a burial site, and palm wine, right? So the mojo bag will, it will hold some of the amulets and tokens and other ingredients granted by the ancestors, your ancestors, required for the craft. And so it's a situation of like, if a Bata'a user is serious about it, they can find this stuff, a lot of this stuff, in any botanica or any curio shop that is quote unquote Bata'a friendly, if you will, so they can find the basics for their mojo bag in these shops to get started. But in order to use it, properly, they need to speak with an elder, or they need to be taken in by a house to properly work there.
One of the 7 clans?
Yeah, one of the 7. So they need to be taken in by a clan, to help properly work that craft.
Okay, so if one Bata'a meets another from far away, and he says, "Well, I don't worry about that clan stuff," and the other guy knows, "Oh, hold on, this guy might not be on the level."
Exactly. It's like, oh, wait, you're not wait, you don't associate with the clan? You know what I mean? Like that person is mad suspect. You know what I mean? It's like, are you a Bata'a or are you just playing around? Right?
Okay. Yeah, I was hoping to get that understanding because it was great reading about the 7 clans, but I guess my question was like, to what level is it a part of their lives? But now I'm understanding it, so that's great. If I can, I see 2 listener questions here. Nicholas asks, if you had more pages, what would you have added?
If I had more pages, what would I have added? That is a good question because crafting the Bata'a, that did take a lot, right? That took a lot. If I had more pages, what I would have done is I would have started writing stories about different Bata'a.
Like signature characters?
Yeah,
Or actually like fiction pieces and each one focuses on one character?
like fiction pieces. Like, to be honest with you, as I said earlier in the show, I messed around and created a whole secret universe in all the games that I wrote on. As a comic book writer, creator, like, yeah, I want to explore these characters more. I want to get into that more in these stories. It's great that it exists for people to play games, but as a comic book creator, as a writer, artist, yeah, I want to make the Dark Kingdom another franchise, if you will. That's my other franchise from my major franchise that I have in the comic book industry.
Chuck asks, the Ngoma and Bata'a chapters both state the 2 crafts feel close. The points of origin in Africa are distant. The magic styles are quite different, and the overall personalities of the 2 crafts are not so much the same. How did they come to feel so close to each other?
Well, that, for me, that's a personal thing, because I am what I like to call bicultural. My mother is from West Africa. My father's from the States. So when I look at the Noma and I look at the Bata'a, it's a situation of a brother or sister from the continent interacting with a brother or sister from the West. So it's like there is that root there. I mean, keep in mind, on the African continent, there are 54 countries that were created. Keep in mind that they have many, many different cultures within those 54 countries. Okay? Keep in mind that the bulk of what I like to call African America comes from the western part of the continent. So when I'm talking about the people that were brought over to North and South America and the islands, we come from the Western Hemisphere. So that's where those links are. You know what I mean? It's those ancestral links, which through this forced migration, that's where the differences lie. Does that make sense? But the root is still there, and there's that common root that links both the clans together.
Can you tell us some more about other projects you're working on? Because role-playing games, as you said, is not your only gig.
Right. So my main gig is, yes, I'm in the comic book industry. I'm a writer. I'm an artist. I'm a publisher. My company is called Griot Enterprises. The flagship title from Griot Enterprises is The Horseman, which is the saga of the gods of Africa returning to Earth and possessing 7 people to save humanity from itself. So when I say that the Dark Kingdom is like my other franchise, The Horseman is my quote-unquote superhero universe, which has been around for over 20 years. And the Dark Kingdom is my dark fantasy horror universe. Okay? So with The Horseman, just published the latest book, Mark of the Cloven, Volume 2, which is out now. I have to fulfill my Kickstarter orders for that. I am also on the editorial board of a grand crossover that should be coming out later on this year called the Epiphany Engine, where over 35 African American comic book publishers, we've gotten together. We brought our characters together. We've gotten like some of the best talent in the industry. And it's basically the Black Comics version of Crisis on Infinite Earths. So, yeah. So I'm on the editorial team for that. I am also currently doing submissions for the 10th and final volume of an anthology series that I put together starting 2015 called 4 Pages, 16 Bars, a visual mixtape, which is the longest running anthology series focusing on independent works from creators of color. And so getting submissions now for the 10th and final volume, which is also going to honor Turtel Only, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, who was basically the father of the Black Age of Comics movement in the 90s, of which the Black comics movement that's happening now is based off of. So, yeah, I'm in the process of putting together, getting submissions for that. And if we talk about the whole music link in my work, the philosophy behind 4 Pages, 16 Bars, a visual mixtape, is that comics are hip hop. And what I mean by that is I'm talking about the culture, because hip hop isn't just Death Row Records. It's not just Def Jam. It's not just No Limit. It's not just Raucous. It's all of these labels, you know, working to create this community, this culture, which we know as hip hop. And that's the same thing with like the Black comics community. There's not just one company. You know what I mean? There's so many different companies, from Griot Enterprises to Advent Comics to Godhood Comics to Webway Comics to, you know, all of these other groups, to Wingless Entertainment, for example. You know, all of us are doing the work, and we're moving the needle. And what happens is that people look to like DC and Marvel. It's like, oh, for representation. It's like, no, the true representation is happening on the indie level. And it's been happening for over 30 years. You see what I mean? So
I think I'm starting to. Yeah, I've talked to a number of friends of mine who are really big into comics, and I ask them, so what's Marvel and DC up to these days? And they say, we don't know. We're reading the good comics.
And, you know, and part and parcel of it is that Griot Enterprises, we're putting out those good comics. You know what I mean?
All right.
We're putting out that stuff. And yeah, it's so much going on. And then I just became creative director for a company called Rocbottom Studios, which is going to be the largest animation studio run and operated by African Americans in the country. And I just came on as their creative director to head up their comic book division, of which Griot Enterprises is going to be an imprint of. And they're also going to be producing the Horseman animated series as well.
Oh, wow. That's a lot on your plate. Can you handle it all?
It's what I do. You know?
Sounds like you can.
In addition to my regular gig as being I'm a college professor as well at 3 different schools. So, yeah. So
you like to keep busy.
You have to. When you talk about the Bata'a, like in essence, I'm living that Bata'a life. You know,
just without the technocracy trying to get you.
Huh. Are you sure about that?
Okay, I'm not.
You know what I'm saying? Gotta keep one step ahead. you know what I mean? Gotta keep one step ahead. Keep that head on the swivel, right?
Yeah, I remember that expression from your chapter. That's a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thanks for taking the time to discuss your chapter with us today. If any of this sounds interesting, you'll probably like Forbidden and Forgotten Orders from Mage 20. Before we sign off, is there anything you wanted to say to our listeners?
Again, thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to reveal some secrets. I didn't reveal them all, but if you want to have more secrets revealed, play the game as a Bata'a.
If you have something to say, please contact us at magethepodcast@gmail.com with your questions, comments, or feedback. Subscribe to Mage the Podcast on iTunes, Google Play, TuneIn, and other aggregators. If you like the show, others might like it too, and if you leave a review of Mage the Podcast, it makes us more visible in their searches. You can follow us on Bluesky, Mastodon, and Threads. The links are in the show notes. We're also on the web at magethepodcast.com. You can listen to past episodes there and see the complete show notes. We have a YouTube channel now where you can find our episodes. There's a link in the show notes, but you can also search YouTube for Mage the Podcast. You'll find us. This episode was assisted greatly by our executive producers, and I want to thank them now. Oracle Derek Semsick, Oracle Jason Vines, Oracle Drawncap, Oracle Ben Bandelo, Oracle Sean Gallagher, Oracle The Crew of Erebus, Oracle McHale, Oracle Christopher Phillips, Oracle Guy Stewart, Oracle Buck Gregory, Oracle Bad Company, Oracle Spartacus, Archmaster Andrew Edelstein, Archmaster Berto, Archmaster Brad of the Blue, Archmaster Dan Svensson, Archmaster Jeff Waugh, Archmaster Leroy Bryce, Archmaster Morgan Aaron, Archmaster Simon Strand, Archmaster Wolf Larison, Morris Hopkins, James B., Jervis Johnson, EBG, George Lara, Will Vincent, Shartan, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Tyler Bryan, Jason Duncan, Sev Nessus, Bubba the Pale One, Henry Kraft, Eric Schwenk, Starfish, Ambiversion, Ryan Stray, Lulls and Stuff, Kathleen Halpern, Kelric, Alexia, Patrick McNamara, Blaze Hibbert, Rachel Grace, Daniel Scribner, Ricardo, Rob H., Alex, Nikita Klaimanov, Leslie Weatherstone, Matthew Prohl, Anders S., Bryce Perry, Michael Parker, Jeremy Z., Melissa Krause, Ian Robertson, Curtis Hendricks, That's Real Nito, Sig, Mandel Canos, Darren Hennessy, Eli Levenger, David Rowe, Jason Kennedy, Samuel Tobin, Nibero, Jenna F., Chris Kinner, Gray Trilag H., Daniel Cuppen, Ryan Kendi, Ya Bull, Stephen Carton. If you would like to become an executive producer for Mage the Podcast, it would help us keep producing episodes like this one. You would also become a part of our own council to discuss upcoming projects. The link in the show notes will get you started. Well, thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, truth until paradox, baby.